Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Steve Peterson. We're here in the garage with a couple of my Velosters. In recent videos, I found cylinder 2. There's an exhaust valve on cylinder 2 of this engine that has a chunk blown off of it. So that means cylinder 2 has little to zero compression, and that means the whole head needs to be removed and either a valve replaced and head rebuilt or a new head put on this engine. So I happen to have a spare engine here, and in order to fix this engine, we're going to put this spare head that I know is good off of this engine on this car. In order to get the heads off of both of these engines, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be kind of set in motion with the process of removing the valve cover on both of these engines, removing the timing cover on the side of the engine, removing some of the timing components. For this video, I wanted to just kind of separate a lot of this. We're going to focus specifically on removing the valve cover of both of these engines. Obviously, the valve cover is kind of the first stage or the first step in fixing both of these or getting them prepped to swap. So I'm going to show you basically all the connectors and getting the wiring harness out of the way here in the engine bay of this Veloster. And then I will show you physically removing the valve cover on this engine because I want to get the head off of this engine first. I want to get it cleaned up and rebuilt before I even start ripping apart this engine. So for the sake of making a valve cover removal video, again, I'm going to be kind of between both of these projects. I thought it was kind of nice to show what it looks like as a stock engine bay, what you need to move, what you don't need to move, just to get the valve cover off on this engine, but physically remove the valve cover on this engine just to give you a better look, kind of 360 degrees around the engine. You can see where all the bolts are hidden that way. I'll show you what tools you need, things like that as we go. Hopefully this helps with somebody that's maybe just looking to replace valve cover gaskets. Maybe you've got a seeping issue with oil, or you've noticed you're getting some oil down in your spark plug holes and it's fouling plugs or ignition coils. Chances are you've got a bad valve cover gasket, and that valve cover gasket is what seals the cover to the head or the top of the engine. It's what keeps the camshaft area covered and lubricated. So it's also where the high pressure fuel pump mounts. So there's kind of a lot going on this valve cover. Again, it's really easy to change the valve cover gasket on this car. If you are having a leaking issue around the valve cover, I recommend fixing that as soon as you can. A new gasket really isn't very expensive, and this whole project can be done within just a couple hours in basically your driveway. We're going to focus again on these two valve cover projects, and then moving forward, I will be basically pulling the timing apart on this engine and removing the head on this engine, and I will be breaking all that down in some future videos. So if you're interested in seeing that and following along in this build, definitely hit that subscribe button. If you're interested in seeing some more exclusive content, photos, videos, things like that of me and the show car at events, find me on Instagram at Steve the Woody Peterson. As always, I appreciate everybody for watching and following along. The comments have been great. Some of you have reached out to me about your own projects and builds, so that's been pretty cool. I encourage everyone to continue doing that. Without further ado, let's get the valve covers off of both of these engines. What we have here is the stock engine bay of the black car. And you can see there's all the wiring harness, and everything is still all plugged in the car. All I have done basically here in this engine bay is remove the big plastic cover over the engine so that you can see everything displayed as it would be stock from the factory. First thing I want to do is unhook the battery connections, disconnect the battery on the car, because we will be unplugging most of all of the connectors here along the top of the engine, as well as some of the connectors here at the front of the engine, in front of the intake manifold, just so we can completely get the harness up and out of the way. The idea is basically to unplug everything and then just kind of take the harness and kind of like lift it up out of the way, just kind of like lay it over here on the side and just kind of keep it off of the valve cover so that you can work without fighting all the wiring and such. Once you've got all of this stuff kind of unplugged and out of the way, we'll move into removing all the bolts around the valve cover. I also want to point out, in order to do this job, you literally only need like 2 tools. I like using a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. It's small. It kind of fits in, all the areas of the engine bay. Just like a 3-inch or a 2-inch extension. And I like using a deep well socket just because it gives me just enough for some of the places where the bolts are kind of set down lower in, or just in some harder to reach places. I just find working with this tool specifically makes this job nice and easy. It's a nice light tool. There's no need to put a big ratchet in here or use power tools in this instance. All of these bolts are basically a 6mm thread. They're all 10mm head bolts. You don't need anything else really that special to remove the valve cover on this car. I like having a pair of like needle nose style pliers or something along these lines. These are like a channel lock plier that Snap-on makes. These are kind of a nice plier. You can kind of make them different sizes. They work nice because they've got some kind of like flat nose on them, so they grab onto connectors and allow you to pull them off nicely. So I like having a set of these. Most of the connectors in this engine bay, you should be able to basically just squeeze them and pull them off. All of the other connectors in this engine bay are going to be pretty easy to get to. There's a couple that are a little bit of a challenge. You may need some smaller hands to reach them, but still it's just the push of a clip on the side and pull the connector off. All of these don't have any like locking pins or anything that special, except the connectors on your ignition coils. There's the little gray clips. You just remember, if you've watched my other videos on removing plugs and things like that, you've seen me there. It's just a little gray clip you push off to the side and then again squeeze and pull. So you don't want to break those clips, because once you break those clips, the connector doesn't stay on the ignition coil anymore, and that's a problem. So be very careful with the ignition coil connectors. All of the other connectors here in the engine bay are pretty beefy. You can kind of squeeze them and pull them, and none of them should be really that tight. So moving on, we're going to basically disconnect all of the connectors. You have the gray one here that you just see me unplug on the side. You have the exhaust VVT solenoid here on top. Again, that's just a squeeze and a pull. Basically, as I move down the harness here, I see now I've got the ignition coil plugs. So I've already removed the ignition coils on this engine in a previous video. But again, these are, you pull the little gray thing, squeeze, pull, boom, boom, boom. There's 4 of those. We come down here to this end, and now there's kind of a conglomerate of quite a few connectors. There's the one here on the high pressure fuel pump. Again, that's just a squeeze, a pull, and an unplug. Back down behind here, there is a connector on the camshaft solenoid on the intake side. Again, that's just a squeeze and a pull right off. Further back here, there is a plug on, I'm not really sure what this is, but there's like a sensor that is bolted to the valve cover. It's just one single wire. This one is kind of hard to push the button on, but again, it should just be a push and a squeeze. There it is. It's a push and a squeeze. And then here in the back is the other camshaft sensor. This one is also kind of a challenge to get to, but it's just a squeeze and a pull as well. There we go. That one's kind of a tough spot. Once you get all the connectors here along the top of the valve cover undone, I like to move them towards the front. Let's get that big plug here on top of the intake manifold undone. Again, just a squeeze. There we go, a squeeze and a pull. We move down the harness here. You'll see we stop here at the intake VVT solenoid. There's a plug there. That's again just a squeeze and a pull. We also have a pit stop here at the alternator. This one is sometimes tight, but again, a squeeze and a pull, that pops off. The next one is pretty far down. This one's kind of a challenge to get to. It is a sensor that is down. You can follow it down. Again, a squeeze and a pull. It's just one wire, and it releases that plug right there. I recommend a small screwdriver, and what you can do is just push the little tab back on the zip tie, and boom, release it that way. Okay, so now you've got the whole harness here coming off this side. Your next step will be to follow this main wire here down the front. You don't have to release this one, but I do find it easier to remove the valve cover if you do remove this one. You'll see here it's just pressed into the front of the intake manifold. There's like a big plastic clip that holds the harness in. You have a stop here at the boost sensor here on the intake manifold. Again, basically just a squeeze and a pull, and that pops out. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 other connectors down here at the front of the intake manifold. They are kind of squeezed in between the fan shroud and the intake manifold, and those are kind of a challenge to get to. I'm going to show you up close what those are. Here we have, again, here's the boost sensor that I just unplugged. But if you look down past, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 plugs down in here, and those are kind of a challenge to get to. I'll be very honest with you. Some of them require 2 hands to squeeze and pull at the same time. Some of them can be reached with your pliers. That's why we have those. But again, I'm going to pop those 4 off, and then we'll be back with the next steps. Okay, I have those 4 plugs undone. I found actually a pair of extended needle nose pliers worked well. I was able to kind of reach down in there and like squeeze and pull the plug. Really made much easier work of that. My hands are kind of big, so it was kind of difficult to get my hands down in there and reach. And these needle nose pliers were not long enough. So again, I ended up using kind of a long stretch pair of needle nose. If you don't have these, a smaller set of hands that can reach down there and squeeze the plugs off would be ideal. Now you can see, boom, I have all of those plugs here undone. I have this plug undone. I have all of this harness unplugged here. And now at this point, with all the ignition coils out and unplugged, we can remove this whole part of this harness and basically just fold this back out of the way. The last thing that I like unplugging, just in case, because I don't want to damage it, would be the purge valve here. It's right at the end of the harness, the part that's going to be kind of flexing a lot once we fold it back. So again, so that I don't damage any of these connectors, we're just going to unplug that. To get the harness undone off of the top of the valve cover, you just have these 2 10mm bolts here right at the top. They shouldn't be very tight. I'll get out my ratchet and pop these loose. There we go. I don't really like using power tools in this situation, like any like cordless drills or impacts or ratchets or anything like that. All of these screws are literally just screwed into aluminum. None of them should be very tight. There's no reason why you should strip them or damage any of the threads in the valve cover whatsoever. Everything is just these little, you know, they're little M6. They're small. They're easy to undo. There's not a high torque tolerance on these, so just be careful when doing them all. Now we have those 2 out. You can see basically we can lift the whole harness up and kind of like out of the way. Now, to keep this up and out of the way, there's a few different things that you can do. You can basically take the longest stretch of the wire here, which is this one, and zip tie it up above. You can go right up here to zip tie it to the hood latch. And it just kind of holds the whole harness up out of the way and allows you to work on the valve cover without damaging anything or fighting anything. So that's usually what I do. If you don't want to do it that way, that's fine. But I just find that that works nicely, gets everything up and out of the way. One of the next components that we need to disconnect off of the valve cover is going to be this breather hose running to your intake tube. If you are running catch cans, most likely you're running a catch can or your second catch can off of this breather hose. This is the one that you would typically vent to atmosphere if you were running a catch can. Then you also have down here at the front the PCV line. This is where your other line would run towards a catch can. If you were running just a single can, this is the side that you would want to run that can off of, which is the PCV valve. On this situation, we're going to connect or disconnect back here basically by squeezing this clamp and pulling the hose off. And same thing here, we're going to squeeze this clamp and pull the hose off and disconnect those hoses. The last thing we'll have to remove off the valve cover in order to get us squared away will be the high pressure fuel pump that is back here in the corner. So here we are close up to the high pressure fuel pump. There is two connections on this fuel pump. One of them here is the high pressure inlet side, and this is the high pressure outlet side. This side here at the front is what runs through this hard line up to the fuel rail, and you're not going to be able to see it, but the fuel rail is up underneath the intake manifold. It is, boom, right here, okay? So again, we have the outlet coming here out of the high pressure fuel pump. It's a hard line, it runs down the side and runs, and then boom, it bolts on here to the fuel rail. This is where your fuel injectors are, right? There you are, there's that connection there. You do not need to remove this pipe right now. We don't need to do anything with any of this if all you're doing is removing the valve cover. If you are doing a head replacement, head gasket swap, whatever it is, then yes, you will eventually pull the fuel rail, you'll pull the injectors, all of that will come out. But since we're just removing the valve cover today, I don't need to touch any of that in this video. I'm just talking about removing the fuel pump here, which is these two connections. So you'll see here, this is this side of the connection. This is just like a compression fitting with a bolt on it. This side is kind of the tricky side. So on here, there is this clip, okay, and it looks like that, okay, and it's like this on both cars. There's the same clip on this car, okay. In order to expose the fuel line underneath, this just pops up and out of the way, okay. Now, on this, sorry, it's kind of hard to see, but on here, there's this little plastic retainer here, okay, and that plastic retainer needs to be pushed in, and the hose needs to be pulled off at the same time. So you kind of need to like push the hose on, like push it on, and then take a flat blade screwdriver and push back that little plastic retaining ring, and then you'll be able to pull the fuel line off all at the same time. It's kind of like one motion. I'm not going to physically do it in the video here because this line is still pressurized, and I'm not ready to disconnect it on this engine yet, but I just wanted to show that process. Then the bolt on the other side of the fuel pump, or the compression fitting here, this one, is a 19 millimeter. Boom. Okay. And it shouldn't be very tight. You're going to want to unscrew it, and the nut just kind of stays on there. You do not want to damage this side of the connector here. This is a compression fitting. This is what gets pushed into the fuel pump. You're going to disconnect this. Okay, once you got that disconnected, you have the two 10 millimeter bolts here on both sides. There's one here and one here. Do not remove one all the way out and think that you're going to be able to remove one all the way out one at a time. You need to equally unscrew them a little bit at a time. So go back and forth between the two before, you know, they come out together. Okay, you can't just pull one out, because if you pull one out, there's a spring underneath this fuel pump and it starts tipping, and it's going to get the fuel pump stuck, and it's going to jam a bolt in here, and you're going to strip or you're going to break these bolts off. I've seen it happen. I don't know how, but people have done it. They've broken bolts off here on the high pressure fuel pump because they tried to take one bolt out completely and leave the other one in. You're going to damage the fuel pump. You're going to damage your valve cover. Don't do that. One bolt loosen, and then equally go back and forth and take them out. Once you have done that, you'll be able to pull this line away, okay? And you'll be able to kind of back and forth the fuel pump, and the fuel pump is going to pop out, right? Just like that, okay? On around that fuel pump, there's just a seal. Make sure you inspect that before you reinstall this fuel pump if you're planning on reusing it. Also, down in that hole, there is going to be a little like cam. It looks like this. You're going to inspect that for any major damage or blockages to those holes, anything like that. Make sure it still rolls nicely and freely. There's no damage there. If there is, you're going to want to replace it. If there isn't, then keep it with your fuel pump if you're planning on reusing your fuel pump. And once you got the fuel pump removed, basically the sensors that are here on the camshaft sensors, you can basically leave those in. You really don't need to remove those. If you're just replacing a valve cover gasket, you just leave those in. Those aren't a problem. On this side, you do need to remove the exhaust VVT solenoid here on the top. It's right here. There's just one. I'll show you on this one. There's just one 10mm bolt. Once you pull that 10mm bolt out, you'll be able to grab the solenoid and kind of turn it and pull it at the same time. There is, again, another oil seal around this, so it might be in there a little tight. You're going to have to kind of give it a little wiggle and pull, but it will come out of there. Anyway, back to the valve cover removal. Once you've got the high pressure fuel pump out and you've got all the wiring harness out of the way, you've got your ignition coils removed, you've got this solenoid removed, your next step is going to be to start removing all of the bolts around the valve cover. They are, again, all a 10mm head bolt. They shouldn't be very tight, so I just use, again, my little ratchet with an extension and the socket, and boom, 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 go all the way around the valve cover and start removing them. This is another situation where I would recommend not just like removing all of the bolts right away. I like going through all of them and just cracking them loose first, just to make sure that they are all going to come off nicely and they're not going to have any issues. So we'll just go one by one. We'll crack them all loose. There is some located here along the center as well. There's 4 of them that hold the center of the valve cover down. Do not forget any of those. Once you've removed all of the bolts, the valve cover should be ready to pull. It should basically just lift right off. You may need to take a small screwdriver and do some light prying here. I like using this edge to kind of get in and lift the valve cover up and kind of separate. But again, it's just a silicone or a gasket that runs around there. It's not like, you know, RTV'd or anything like that down. It shouldn't be very hard to lift up and pull off once you've got all of the bolts removed. When it comes to removing the bolts, I'll show you all of the locations here as we go around the top of the valve cover. So there's this one here starting in the corner. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 around the outside. Once you get to 13 out around the outside, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 here in the center next to all of your ignition coils. Obviously, your ignition coils would be removed at this point. And once you have all of those out and you have all of the outside ones out, again, the valve cover is just going to lift right off. So we have all of the bolts out. We have the valve cover loose now. I'm going to show you here that it basically just lifts up and off the top of the head. We have now exposed our camshafts and the underside of the valve cover. Now, your area is going to be way better lubricated, and you're going to see way more oil splashed around. This engine has been sitting for a couple of years, actually. Matter of fact, for a while of that time, there wasn't even a valve cover on here. I just had like a towel stuffed down over the top of it because I didn't have a valve cover. I robbed it off of here to fix something else. So for a long time on this engine, again, there wasn't a valve cover on here. That's why it looks so dry. Yours should not look this dry. It should look very lubricated. There should be oil splashed all over everything under here, as well as the underside of your valve cover. While I'm here looking at the underside of the valve cover, you can see here in the center, around the spark plug holes, there is part of the valve cover gasket that's still in here. This is the part of the gasket that would fail, and you would see oil in the spark plug tubes from the gasket seeping here. It's very common. I've seen it many times. People go, why does my car keep misfiring? Why do I keep eating through spark plugs? Why do my ignition coils keep failing? It's because you're getting oil down in your spark plug tubes from it seeping around a bad valve cover gasket, and it's failing those coils and failing those plugs. So something to be aware of there. This gasket is really easy to replace. It just pulls right out of the channel. There is another portion that runs around the outside of the valve cover. On this one, it's already been removed so that you can see what that channel looks like. It runs all the way around the outside of the cover, just presses right in. And if that side of the gasket fails, you start seeing oil seepage. So there's a bunch of oil here wrapped around the back of the valve cover. You can see where it's been seeping at some point in time, most likely a valve cover failure. Around this. As a matter of fact, right here. This is probably what was leaking on this valve cover, causing this oil to kind of get blown back here around the back side of the valve cover. You'll also see how wet this side of the valve cover is here where it meets the timing or the front cover. Most likely the valve cover gasket was starting to fail due to the miles on the engine. It's just something that happens over time. Most engines do it. Valve cover gaskets are typically pretty easy to replace. There's some cars out there in the world where manufacturers have made changing a valve cover ridiculously hard. The Veloster is not. You've seen it done here in this video. So basically, once you have the whole valve cover removed and you see the camshafts exposed, you can kind of see what our next steps are going to be to get the rest of the head off of the top of the engine here. Obviously, the intake and the exhaust camshaft both need to be removed. And in order to do that, this housing for the VVT solenoid will come off. The whole side cover here down the side of the engine where your pulleys are for your belt, your water pump, your AC compressor, all of that, that whole cover will get removed as well. And we'll be able to expose all of our timing gears and get all of that removed. That is going to be in a separate video. Hopefully this has helped some people with this project and it's kind of exposed some of what the insides of this engine look like. I want to point out this engine, the reason why I know this head is still good, first of all, is because I can inspect all of the valves on the intake side here. Through the holes, I can see all of the carbon buildup that's on the valves. None of the valves look damaged. However, there is some carbon buildup that I will be removing when it comes time to rebuilding this head. I want to point out the lobes on the camshafts are all very evenly clean and worn. Nothing looks like it's scored or damaged across any of those lobes. That tells me that this engine was kept with oil. It wasn't starved of oil really at any points. I don't see any major signs of excessive wear on the camshafts, which is good. Hopefully, as I continue tearing this engine down, I continue to find good things here.
in this engine. I'm told, I bought this engine years ago, that it was pulled out of a Veloster. It still ran, but it was pulled out of a Veloster because it started to have some rod knock, and they wanted to fix it before it left them stranded. So they pulled this engine and put a new one in. And I bought this basically for, a parts engine years ago. I bought it specifically for the head because I knew the head on this engine was still good. I wanted to have that spare. So hopefully, as I get further into the spare engine, everything's good. But again, as for right now, we're just fixing the black Veloster. So it's important that I get the head off of this engine. I want to throw new valve seals in here. I want to get all the carbon buildup cleaned out of it. I want to get this head all cleaned up and prettied up, so that when I get the other head out of the black Veloster pulled, this one's ready to just basically install immediately.
That wraps us up on removing the valve cover for the engine here. That sets us up to remove the timing cover and camshafts on the spare engine and get it prepped to go here into the black car. I'm hoping that once I get into this engine, I'm not going to find any further damage. Hopefully nothing was damaged to the turbo when that piece of valve broke off. I'm not sure. I won't know until I get that pulled out, but we'll see where that goes from here. I know the head's good here. I know the bottom end of this engine's good, so we'll make a good engine out of it. If you're interested in checking out the channel, following along, seeing more, hit that subscribe button. Again, my name is Steve Peterson. You can find me on all social media at Steve the Woody Peterson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.